I am willing to bet that at some point during your life, or perhaps even right now, you have experienced insecurity, self-doubt, creative burnout, and I am not talking about moodiness here or, having a bad day, but rather something that is always there, lingering in the back of your mind, that is always telling you that, your work sucks, you're a fraud, and you should just stop what you're doing before you embarrass yourself any further. If you have no idea what I'm talking about and you've never experienced this, I'm happy for you. But for the rest of us, I want to share 4 things that have always done a really good job of breaking my confidence, of putting me into a rather dark place emotionally, and just making me feel miserable. But first, I want to mention that this video is sponsored by Skillshare. Okay, so the first thing that I have struggled with for years, like throughout my life and professional career, is something that I call the perfection gap. And to describe what this is, there is a story that you sometimes hear from songwriters who describe songs coming to them in their sleep and how they've learned to keep like a phone or a recorder, a notepad, just something on their nightstand so that if they happen to dream up a melody or even a complete song while they're sleeping, that they can get as much of it out of their head as they possibly can before the song drifts away and is gone forever. Now, I've heard this same story multiple times in interviews with different people, and the songwriter will usually say that the song that they wrote, which by the way is most likely a popular song, a song that you and I know well, a song that we couldn't imagine being any different, how that song is similar to what they heard in their dream, but not as good. There's a qualitative difference between the song they wrote and the perfect song they dreamt. The perfection gap then is the difference between what something is and what something could have been. But what you think is perfect today will not only change in the future, but it's also a destination that can never be reached. There is a fantastic proverb that I heard once, you may have heard it before, that just sums it up so perfectly. Beyond mountains, there are mountains. Meaning you climb one mountain, thinking that everything is going to be perfect and finished and complete when you get to the top, only to discover that there are more mountains ahead of you. So here's what I try to do. If an image of mine, it falls short of expectations, and I'm sitting there looking at it and I can only see the mistakes. If I were a musician, perhaps I'd be listening to something and all I would hear is just, the mistakes in my playing and how my playing is just not up to the same level of someone else that I just, respect so highly. What I tried to do is to, take a moment and try to look at those mistakes from a different angle. Instead of beating myself up for making a mistake, I try to take pride in the fact that I can see the mistake. Like I know what the problems are. I know how the image could be better because my eyes are more mature today than they were a year ago. And a year before that, I've learned more. I've experienced more. I've failed more. So if you are experiencing something similar and you're feeling yourself, getting caught up in the ideal, getting caught up in, what something could have been, and you're feeling that sting of disappointment because, something you created just didn't live up to expectations. Perhaps it would be healthier to focus on the process. Focus on what it is that you can do each day to incrementally improve. And I have some thoughts on how to do that in a minute, but there's a second thing that may also be making you miserable that we need to talk about, and that is something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Weird name, but really interesting. This is a study conducted by psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger. They found that when people were asked to do a particular task, the people with the least amount of experience were the most confident. Whereas the people who were skilled, like the people who actually knew what they were doing, the people who actually had experience, were less confident. It seems backwards, right? On paper, it doesn't make sense. Well, take photography, for example. When someone goes out and buys their first proper camera, and by proper, I mean, something better than a phone, like they buy a camera body with interchangeable lenses and all that. And they then go out and they they learn the basics of, the exposure triangle, rule of thirds, leading lines, and maybe they pick up a few things here and there in Photoshop. They may feel like a photographer. They may think, wow, this really isn't that hard, because I'm getting beautiful images out of this camera. I mean, I know I certainly felt that way at first when I first got into photography, and I was just really excited about getting into it, and I felt like I was, getting great images. But what happens thereafter, according to the findings of the Dunning-Kruger study, once someone moves beyond that beginner status and they start to learn more, they quickly realize how deep the well truly is, and their confidence just falls off a cliff. They now recognize how little they actually know and how much time and effort is going to be required in order for them to get better. Now, similar to how perfectionism can sometimes be a good thing, I don't think the findings of the Dunning-Kruger effect are necessarily such a bad thing. Because I think there's something uniquely wonderful and human about this. Because if people just avoided throwing themselves into new things with confidence, well, I mean, nothing new would ever be created. Again, with a music analogy, it reminds me of like popular bands who were completely inexperienced when they first got together and they went out and they started performing in public. They knew a few chords and they could put a few basic songs together, but really that's about it. A band like Talking Heads, for example, like a band that that was really more of like an art project when they first started performing together. And yet somehow, despite their lack of experience, they had the confidence to get up on stage and perform and do it over and over again. And had they not, well, they never would have existed. I wouldn't have seen David Byrne on Broadway last year. So at that moment, when you move beyond beginner status and that confidence of yours falls off a cliff and you're now down in what's sometimes called the Valley of Despair, such a wonderful name. And you're now appreciating, the mountains beyond the mountain that you feel like you just climbed and you're feeling miserable. How do you move forward from there? And how do you acquire more experience and try and start to build back some of that initial confidence that you had? Well, there's a very popular book I would recommend checking out if you haven't already. It came out a few years ago called Atomic Habits by James Clear. The premise of the book is that improving your work, or your life for that matter, it doesn't necessarily always require huge sweeping change. Clear argues in his book that small incremental change can yield the greatest results over time. And for me, the whole book can be summed up in this one chart. The idea here is that small changes and improvements in your day-to-day life add up like compound interest over time. And there are many examples in the book, if you're interested in checking it out, of people who made simple, small tweaks to their life, their work, by introducing repeatable habits that eventually led them to greater success, that helped them reach their goal. And the takeaway that I had from this book after I read it is that if I commit myself to making learning like a daily repeatable habit, if every day I try to learn something new, which in photography and video would be, learning a different editing technique, learning a new piece of software. It could also be writing something, or hey, making a new video like this one, or just going out and creating new images, even if none of those images are worth keeping, even if it feels at the time like potentially a waste of time. It's not, because day by day, I'm building deeper experience and knowledge simply by committing to making learning and trying new things a repeatable habit. In the beginning, these small habits, they may not seem like much, but later on down the road, the theory is you'll be much further ahead than you would be otherwise. But let's be real. What if that doesn't work? What if you still feel stuck? What if you still feel miserable? You still feel like there's something in there, something in the back of your brain that is holding you back? Well, there are two more things on my list here that could also be making you miserable, but I need to pause for a moment to talk about the sponsor of this video, Skillshare. If the topic of my video here is of interest to you, I would recommend checking out best-selling author Emma Gammon, who shares 5 exercises to build confidence and unlock your creative potential. And hey, since you're on YouTube, you might also recognize YouTube personality Nathaniel Drew, who has his own class over at Skillshare, designed to help you discover and share more of your authentic self online. On Skillshare, there are many more inspiring classes you may take at your own pace, on your own time, around everything else that is going on in your busy life. I have found it to be a great place just to hang out, to relax, to unwind, and while I'm doing that, to learn something new. Circling back to my habit from earlier, right? All videos are ad-free, and every week there's something new for you to discover. The first 1,000 people to use the link in the description below will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So you have plenty of time to explore everything Skillshare has to offer. Thank you, Skillshare, for sponsoring this video. All right, next reason you may be feeling miserable could be something called imposter syndrome. This is another interesting thing from the world of psychology, and I have to tell you that when I first learned about it, when someone first told me about it and they described to me what it was, it blew my mind because I realized that what they were describing was something that I had experienced and something that I had been wrestling with for years in my life. And to a certain degree, I still think about it. It's still something that affects me. And I am not a young guy. I've been around for a while, and yet it still gets me. And it's still something that I think about. So what is it? Well, imposter syndrome is a state of mind where someone feels like a fraud. And when someone is affected by imposter syndrome, the fear that that they are experiencing is that at any moment, their lack of skill or talent or knowledge is going to be exposed. They've yet to discover your mistakes, your bad decisions, your lack of knowledge. And once they do, it's all going to come crashing down. And that fear of being outed can lead to all kinds of negative things, all kinds of things that can cause problems, not just in your work, but also in your day-to-day life as well, including anxiety, depression, poor self-esteem, burnout, you name it. And where this can get really ugly, I think, in today's modern digital world is, surprise, of course, on social media. Because every time someone creates something new, every time someone, writes a blog post or shares an image or, uploads a new video like this one, it creates a new opportunity for that person to be judged. And in their mind, exposed as, some kind of imposter. It's a real pressure that I think a lot of people confront, especially creative people who are, people who are expected to be always, creating new things. That pressure I'm talking about, that need to be seen favorably by others, is actually rooted in the fourth thing that may be making you miserable, and that is something called the spotlight effect. This is a thing where people have a habit of wildly overestimating how much attention other people are actually paying to them. For example, back when I first started this channel that you're looking at here, before I ever uploaded my first video, months before, I went on a landscape photography trip up to Banff National Park in Canada. And I thought, while I'm here and I'm creating these images and I'm doing this, maybe I should do something more than just photography. Maybe I should record, some video content. Maybe I should, make a video while I'm here, talk about what I'm doing. And maybe I should record some of this experience of being here. And so that's what I tried to do. Well, I never posted those videos. I never did anything with them because I didn't think they were any good. I thought they were subpar because I really didn't know what the hell I was doing.
Oh, man, what a morning this has been. I'm out here in Spray Lake. I am up here in, I gotta start this over.
I was also deeply insecure about them. Like when I remember sitting there and trying to edit those videos and I was just feeling like I could barely look at myself on screen. Like I hated listening to my own voice and watching myself in this footage. And so I just never did anything with it. And eventually I started making actual videos. And once I did, you know what happened? Nothing. Here's the thing. Unless you are a very famous person, and there's literally a media spotlight on you at all times, odds are other people are not scrutinizing what you are doing, mainly because, ironically, those other people you're worried about are standing in their own spotlight. As a matter of fact, they're probably wondering what you think of them. And this is exactly what happened to me when I got back from that trip. And I was, looking at that footage and I was just cringing watching it. And I was just thinking, no way, I'm not doing anything with this. I was just so insecure about it. But in retrospect now, looking back, I cared too much about what other people might think. And I allowed my fear of being judged and my fear of something I created being, less than perfect. I let that get in the way of progress. So here's the thing. If you are creating work and you're putting that work out into the world and you are, sometimes you feel miserable doing it. Sometimes you feel like perhaps an imposter, someone who hasn't earned the right or been given permission to do what it is that you're doing. Believing all of that, it places power and control in the hands of other people who, again, probably aren't even paying attention. What's really important then, at the end of the day, and this is what I tell myself, is your own work. And whether you feel like you are incrementally learning and growing every day. Everything else is fiction. So the 4 things that I talked about in this video, the perfection gap, the Dunning-Kruger effect, imposter syndrome, and the spotlight effect, these are all related to each other. They amplify each other. And I think part of the trick here of overcoming these things and not allowing them to get in your way creatively, not allowing them to have a negative impact on your life, is to know what they are, is to be able to call them by name and to recognize them and to know what that is when you are experiencing it so that you're able to contextualize it, you're able to compartmentalize it perhaps even, and not let it get in the way of what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And my hope here is that if you have experienced similar things, similar feelings about your work, that, that this video was helpful or, at least therapeutic in some way. Because honestly, this video that you're looking at, this took me a little while to work up the courage in order to produce and to share, because these are all things that I've dealt with. These are all things that I've struggled with in my own life. And because of that, I questioned whether, making a video like this would be a good idea, if people would think it was weird or off topic or too personal or whatever. And honestly, I finally just landed on screw it. I mean, it's worth doing, I think, especially because I know from experience and from talking to other people how many people there are, especially creatives in different creative fields, who struggle with the exact same problems. And by the way, speaking of that, I would love to hear from you. I would love to know more about your experience. I would love to know if something in this video resonated with you, if it triggered something, if it made you think about something that you've experienced, something that's been going on in your own life. If you have something that you would care to share, please feel free to do so down below. Please use the comments down below. Share it with me, share it with others, if you are inclined to do so. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, please take a moment and give this video a thumbs up down below. And if you would like to hang out with me again in the future, remember to subscribe to this channel down below as well. Thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring this video, and I'll see you next time.